They ruined my life in October of 1960. Do you know what they did to me in October of 1960? They jumped me ahead. They decided that I was ready for second grade, not just first grade, and they jumped me ahead. And you know what that means? That means for the rest of my school career, I got to be the youngest and the smallest kid in the whole class. It went on that way for years and years. There were other things that the big people in my life were doing to try to help me that ended up actually hurting me. They were trying to save my soul. They thought that they had to keep me separated from the evil world around them, and they had no doubt that the world around them was evil because there were cussers and gamblers and smokers and theater goers and Catholics and foreigners all around us in the world, and they were sure that I had to be kept separate from that. They told me I had to have different values than them. So what happened? Imagine a classroom of kids, all about 12 years old. And over there is one kid whose clothes are out of style, who has a GI haircut during the era of the Beatles, who isn't allowed to use any kind of interesting language, who never knows about any of the movies because he isn't allowed to go, who has to say a prayer over his bag lunch every day, and who is supposed to, but never does, carry his Bible around with him all day. And then imagine that he is smaller and younger than everybody else. And imagine that he had the world's worst braces as well. When I was a kid, they decided to fix my teeth with an experimental form of braces that were actually bigger than my head. And I wore those, and they made me talk like this all the time. So there I am, talking like this, with a bad haircut, out of style clothes, not any clue as to what's going on. What do you think happened? When somebody in that classroom decided they were going to pick on somebody, who did they look for? You know who it is. You know what happened. So yes, I was bullied. Mostly there was teasing and pestering and name-calling, and sometimes there was pushing and pinching and ear flicking. Anybody had that done? Try it sometime. You won't like it. Maybe now and then actual fights, knocking me down, punching me in the nose. And worst of all, of all of those things, worst of all, just exclusion. Exclusion. Isolation. A kid who went to school every day with lots of enemies and no friends. So yeah, I was bullied, and it didn't like it. But of course, what happened to me then formed a good piece of who I am today. And at first, I responded to the bullying by taking a chance to bully somebody else if I could find anybody smaller or slower than me. But as I began to grow, I didn't have any stomach for that. I don't like it. I don't like bullying. I don't want to do it, and I don't like seeing it done. When I have done it, and I have, afterwards, it just makes me feel yucky. And I don't like seeing it done to others, and I will do what I can to stop bullying whenever I see it. And one of the things I am here for, one of the reasons I am a Christian is because one of the themes of the Bible is God doesn't care for it either. You heard the story of Ishmael and Hagar. We didn't read that today, but Ishmael is a wife of Abraham. Abraham is one of God's chosen people and promises to Abraham that he's going to be the ancestor of a great nation. But his wife doesn't have any children, so his wife says, take Ishmael, my slave, take Hagar, my slave, and have a child with her. And Abraham does. And then Sarah, she has her own child, and she can't stand the sight of her slave with a child, an heir to the family who is older than her own child, and she bullies her. She pushes her around. She makes life miserable, and finally she tells Abraham, if you don't get rid of her, I don't want to tell you what's going to happen. And Abraham sends her off into the desert, just sends her off into the desert alone with nothing except one jug of water for herself and her child. And the Bible tells us that while she's out there in the desert wondering how much longer she can live, God looks down and sees her and shows her that there is more water over here, and then says, and don't be afraid, because I'm going to take your child and make a great nation out of him as well. Or my favorite story from the life of Jesus, and I know it's a disputed story, but it's the one where excuse me, a woman is brought to Jesus who has been caught in the act of adultery, and they want to stone her like the law says, and there's a crowd of men surrounding this poor woman who is going to be put to death because of something that she could not possibly have done just by herself, and yet she's the only one that is standing there. And Jesus interferes and he stops the crowd. He tells them, whoever of you has never committed a sin, you go ahead and throw the first stone. And they feel shame and they walk away, and he gets up off the ground and he looks at that woman and he says, who is there that condemns you now? And she says, there are no one, they've all gone. And Jesus says, I don't condemn you either. And go your way and don't sin anymore. Jesus did not care for bullying when he saw it, and he saw it plenty. He spoke God's love to people of all kinds and told them that God loved them where they were. Now, when people are bullied, there are two predictable results for what happens. When people are bullied, there's two things that they do to react to that. First of all, there are those who just accept their mistreatment as inevitable. This is the way life is. This is the way it will always be. And they never expect anything better than this. And they may spend their entire lives being bullied and pushed around and hit and taken advantage of by others. And most tragic of all, we know that there are young folks in our own society, young folks who have been bullied so badly that they have taken their own lives. Can you imagine? So that is one of the predictable results of being bullied, and it breaks my heart to see it. And the other predictable result is that they strike back. Sometimes the bullied become bullies. And they believe that life is about either being a victim or being a bully, and they decide, I'm going to be a bully. And they begin to harm others. You know what's a good way to raise a bully? Bully them. Push them around as a parent. Be mean to your kids. Push them around. Make life hard for them. You'll see, it's not that hard to turn someone into a bully. There are breaking points, though. And sometimes the one who is bullied lashes out and reacts, often in violent ways. They unleash on a person or a group all of the pain that they had felt from being bullied all those years. You know, we're dealing with terrorism in our world, and terrorism is a terrible thing. There's no question about that. But we have decided to respond to terrorism with more violence. That's the way we're trying to resolve the problem of this. We have not yet dealt with the fact that those who are committing acts of terrorism have a perception of themselves as victims in the world. And sometimes they're right about that. And we're not going to get rid of terrorism in this world until we acknowledge the fact that that's where it comes from in part. That's enough of that, because I'm here to give you the good news. For those of you who knows what it's like to be bullied, and I am sure in a room with this many people in it, there are those here who have. Let me say this. God's gentle hands are on you. The Holy Spirit is within you, in your breath and in your blood, and it is healing you and changing you. God does not abandon those who are bullied. God cares for them, and if you let it, God's love changes you and makes you stronger. Strong enough to be neither a victim nor a bully in this world. I have no doubt that God's hands were on me when I was going through all of that. Though I didn't know it then, God was guiding me and showing me a new reality and remaking me into a new person. A new person in the power of the resurrected Christ. And I began to realize that God loved me, and not because I was so good. God loved me because God didn't love me because I was little and pushed around. God loved me because. God didn't love me because I didn't swear or go to movies. God loved me just because. God didn't love me because I went to the right church. God loved me because I was. Just because I was. Because I am. And in God's eyes, I'm of infinite value. And that helped me to see that the reason I was being bullied had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with them. It was because of the way they had been raised, to believe that they also were of little value. And it was because they felt that they lashed out at me. They were scared and alone and did not believe anyone could love them. So that is one thing. And then there is this grace. God can make you who are bullied into something powerful and beautiful. If you've been bullied, you know what it's like, and you have a choice. Your first choice is you can choose to not do it to anyone else. You know how it feels and you know what it does, and you can choose to not do that. And second, you can respond to those who are bullied. You'll recognize it. You'll know who they are if you're one of those who've been pushed around. Your compassion will make you a strong and beautiful person. And if you are gentle with the little ones around you, children, refugees, people who face discrimination, you'll be admired and honored if you are gentle with them. And you'll find yourself closer to God because you will be reflecting God's work. And there will be work for you. To be the voice and hands of God in this world, we've got to reach out to those who are suffering and who've been pushed around. And the last thing I want to say is this. There is grace for the bully today. If there is anyone in this world who needs the kindness of God, it is the bully that you know. The one who is pushing others is filled with fear that they don't recognize, and anger that they can't manage, and doubt that overwhelms them. They bully others, and then they find themselves more bullied, more isolated than the one that they're tormenting. They are dying inside, and they need the touch, the healing touch of Christ's hands, and that can be you. If you think bullies are tough because they push other people around, it takes a lot more strength to heal than it does to hurt. It takes a lot more strength to be a healer than a herder in this world. It is far harder to build someone up than to tear them down. It takes someone with strength and courage, and that could be you. The strength that Christ showed as he faced the worst that can happen to people. The good news for the bully is that the world is full of people who are strong enough to heal them. Right here in this room, there are people here, probably even in these first rows where you are very, very young, although when I was your age, I wasn't. Right here in this room are people with the beauty and the strength and the courage to change the hearts of the bullies and the bullied. And that's where God's grace is at work, through us, in the world around us. There are people who are strong enough to love the poor, the ignorant, the selfish, the foolish, the addicted, the grieving, the dying, and the cruel. Strong enough to love them. And that changes the world. Amen? Amen.
You've been listening to a sermon by Reverend Stephen Carnahan, pastor of High Street Congregational Church in Auburn, Maine. If you feel inspired by what you hear, we invite you to join us in person for worship services every Sunday morning, beginning at 10 o'clock. Of course, you can always listen to Steve's sermons on the web. New sermons are posted every Monday by midday. Please take a moment to explore this website for more information about our church, or visit our Facebook page at High Street Congregational Church, UCC. We hope that God's presence will be known to you every hour of every day, and that God's blessings will rest upon you now and always. See you next week.